time, buddy. Baseball Hall of Fame. I think I messed up. E's on there too, but you're going to have to wait because it's Baseball Talk with Marc Topkin from the Tampa Bay Times. He just changed his whole schedule around to be with us. No, I just put in a little note to the sports director there at the time, so you can join us today. Mark, how are you, buddy?
Worked out good. Yeah, happy to be here, Jay. A lot of football talk. I heard you a little bit earlier, and then a little baseball now.
Yeah, man. And I just had Rob Motti on from the Associated Press with the Baseball Hall of Fame last night. Any surprises? I had 3 of the 4. I had the only guy that I had on that list that I usually don't or that didn't make it in was Omar Vizquel. I think he's the second best defensive shortstop behind a guy like Ozzie Smith. But yeah, 3 of the 4, I was spot on. What say you? Any surprises?
I mean, not really a surprise, more of a disappointment that somebody didn't think Ichiro Suzuki was worth putting in the Hall of Fame because that was such an obvious decision there. And there's one, he was one short of unanimous, and we may never know who that was. The Hall policy is you have to be a veteran member of the Baseball Writers Association to get to vote. The Hall gives you the option to opt in to have your ballots released. They do like a release of them about a week after the fact, but not everyone's required to. I'd like to see the BBWA try to enforce that stronger because I think, accountability and transparency for journalists is probably kind of a good thing. But anyway, if this person does not want to come out and admit who it was or, put themselves out on social media and doesn't opt to release their ballot, we won't know, just like we didn't know who the one person is who didn't vote for Derek Jeter and the 3 people who didn't vote for Ken Griffey Jr. Those are all pretty good ball players who should have probably been unanimous. Mariano Rivera obviously being the only one so far. So that's probably the only disappointment. I mean, I had 3 names on my ballot. Those were the 3 guys who got in. I've kind of become a small hall guy in my grumpy old age. So, I was otherwise, fairly pleased. I mean, I've been on the Billy Wagner train since he's been on the ballot. I think relievers are underrepresented in the Hall. I think they're undervalued by the voters. And I know the big issue, or one of the big issues, was how many innings he pitched, compared to some of the starters. Well, obviously, but the other side to that argument is almost every inning he pitched was in a high leverage moment. So take that, over the stat that's been going around is over 900 innings pitched, the highest strikeout percentage of any pitcher ever, and the lowest batting average against of any pitcher ever with 900 innings pitched. That's pretty good if you're a pitcher to strike a lot of guys out and not give up a lot of hits. So I would take Billy Wagner. I'm glad he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've been on the Billy Wagner train since the beginning. Top 10 closer of all time, left-handed guy that just threw absolute gas. You remember many years there with the Astros, part of a no-hitter. I know that's not the whole credential, but he's just a guy that if you're a closer, and you've seen this more than anybody, Mark, closers, it's like, wow, that guy was good for 2 or 3 years, right? This guy's good for 3 or 4 years. It's hard to be one of those guys that's constantly counted on at the end of the game for better part of a decade. And those guys should be rewarded. I wanted to go back to kind of what you said about Mariano Rivera. Somebody was asking me that last night of like, how do you vote unanimously for Mariano, but not for Jeter and not for Ichiro? Because, all right, maybe reliever is usually one of those things where people hold against you, right? Like you see with Billy Wagner. And I'm like, is it an American thing? Like Jeter's American? Like it was such a weird thing because you start going down the thing. Like, I don't know what the hell is it. The guy was a Metallica fan or something. He loved Enter Sandman. Like I still can't rationalize that Mariano got in unanimously and these guys have it, that these other guys didn't.
Yeah, I mean, look, the voting body changes every year. I don't know who the person was, obviously, in any of these cases, but maybe they weren't an eligible voter that year for the Rivera year. Maybe it's the same person who didn't vote for Jeter and didn't vote for Ichiro, and they actually are a big Mariano Rivera fan. Maybe it's totally 3 different, situations. It's just happenstance that it was one each time. But it's hard to think someone, you didn't accidentally return your ballot and forget to check the box
right
for Ichiro or forget to check the box for Jeter. So the one thing I hope, and this is probably me being the idealistic Mark here, but I hope it wasn't someone with just some petty grievance that, like Jeter blew him off in an interview. Ichiro didn't talk to him or her as the writer, something like that. And that at least whatever their reasoning was, that it, at least in their mind, there was some legitimacy to it. And it wasn't just, like I said, a petty thing.
Yeah, you got that
That
right,
makes
Mark.
us all look bad. If somebody blows you off for an interview, but they're a Hall of Fame player, that shouldn't, as a journalist, like that shouldn't impact your vote. And I would just like to think or hope that's not the case here.
Well, it's funny you say that, Mark, because I love to. I was sitting at the Buccaneers Falcons game a couple years ago with a longtime writer in the Bay Area, Ira Kaufman, and then D. Orlando Ledbetter from Atlanta. And we spoke about Terrell Owens. And Terrell Owens was a guy that, I mean, you look at his numbers, Mark, he's a top 5, top 10 receiver, no doubt about it. But the reason why he didn't get in till the third time was because he didn't have any writers vouch for him, no teammates vouch for him, no head coaches vouch for him. They just all like, they didn't really like the guy, and they almost looked at it as like they understood where writers came from. I said, I don't care. Like, I don't care how he treated anybody. The facts are the facts. The numbers are the numbers. Like, there's not many people that walk the earth that were able to do what Terrell Owens did. Is that different in baseball? How do you view something like that? How does the off the field, and I'm not talking about kind of like the steroids guys, but just how does that off the field and how they were viewed by their teammates, by the writers, by their coaches, how does their affect their candidacy?
Yeah, I mean, look, Jay, I think it'd be naive to say that doesn't have an impact. And I'm not trying to contradict myself, saying a guy a man or woman who didn't vote for a player that was obviously in for an isolated incident, they blew him off for an interview or something, that's wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
if a player in general, is a bad dude, is a bad character, is not, doesn't treat people properly, that's going to impact some people's views. Now, we could have a separate discussion, is that right or wrong? But that's human nature. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to happen. And look, Kurt Schilling kind of created a situation like that with the baseball hall. He basically told us to, F off. He didn't want to be in the hall. Don't vote for me. I don't care. And people didn't, and he dropped off the ballot. I mean, it just, that works that way sometimes. So I do think that, and then there's not a lot of guidance from the Hall of Fame on voting, but when you get your ballot every year, there's like 5 or 6 things that are kind of like the standards, and one of them is like, displayed, I forget the exact phrasing, but like displayed good character. So yeah, I mean, if a person's an ass to everybody, whether it's teammates, media, the public, fans, I mean, that's going to factor in. And I know the argument, it's a museum, it's not a church hall. It should be the best players, but this sport has been, that ideal has been blown apart by the steroid guys and the alleged steroid guys and the after the fact steroid guys. And there's been so much that's tarnished that idea that the Baseball Hall of Fame is for the best players. Look, I have a grandson now. You'll be in that boat someday. I mean, you're gonna go there and you have a Hall of Fame without, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. Uh, that seems kind of weird, right? Two of the best players ever of this era, but it looks like they're not going to get it. Alex Rodriguez is one of the best players this era. He's not going to get in, it looks like. So, I mean, these guys have created issues through their behavior. And I think that's whether it's, we talk about steroid thing or just overall behavior can sometimes impact that for sure.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I remember when I went to the Hall of Fame, had to have been almost 12, 13 years ago. And the first thing I saw when I walked into the Hall of Fame was a large cardboard cutout of Pete Rose, the iconic Charlie Hustle sliding headfirst with his hair. And I'm like, is this real? Like, I thought somebody, like, I thought it was one of those things where it was like people protesting. But the first thing I saw when I walked in was Pete Rose. And I'm like, but his thing's not in the, like, his bust isn't in the back. Like, it's kind of weird, right? And when we talk about like these good dudes, like, don't look up what Ty Cobb has done in his life because
Yeah.
you're not retroactively taking him out of the Hall of Fame either.
Yeah, I mean, Babe Ruth was not a nice person either. He was quite a character. But look, it's different times, it's different era, it's different standards, it's different reason, it's different accountability, it's different voting. People voting, different voting pools. So there's so much that's evolved in a way. And John Romano says this a lot too. But like, this is why baseball is such a great sport. This is why the Baseball Hall of Fame is probably the most discussed Hall of Fame, because of all the different characters, because of how the voting process works, because of some of the transparency. You mentioned Ira. I think he's been a Football Hall of Fame voter for like 150 years or something, right? He put Newt Rockney in, I think. But like, I don't think that's a very transparent process. These guys go into a room and they come out and they say who's in. It seems like they put 10 guys in every year. Like, there's different ways to do this. But I think the reason that there's so much discussion and debate over the Baseball Hall of Fame is exactly for all these reasons.
Yeah, Ira definitely predates the Super Bowl and the forward pass. So that's he's certainly a
Color
character.
TV, right? He predates color TV.
Any TV at all. Any TV. He's the king of the fireside chat. I want to ask you about the Dodgers. I had Denard Span on yesterday because I see so many people, and a lot of them are former players that are like, yeah, they do what they got to do. And I'm just like, wait a second. Like, is this really good? Like, is this great for the game to defer all this money? Look at Shohei Ohtani's contract. It looks like a misprint. $2 million until he's 39, and then $68 million per until he's 48. Like every single guy. They had the best domestic free agent in Blake Snell, international Sasaki. They're getting Kirby Yates. They got who else did they get? Tanner Scott. All these guys going back. It's weird because people look at, oh, well, the Yankees did this, and but they weren't deferring money. They didn't have $500-600 million in deferred money this year like the Dodgers are going to have. What do you make of this offseason splash from the team that just won the World Series? And do you think this is quote unquote bad for baseball?
I mean, clearly they want to be the new evil empire, right? They're
Right.
gonna replace the Yankees, the team everybody outside of their own fans is going to root to lose,
Right.
and them not winning the World Series next year or several times in the next few years will be a much bigger story than them winning it. Them not becoming a dynasty will be a much bigger story and probably greatly enjoyed by a lot more people than if they do. But the deferred money thing, I don't know. I mean, it's a unique situation. They're owned by like a financial firm, right? They're owned by Guggenheim, which is an investment firm that can move all these numbers around and do so in a way that maybe it doesn't come back to bite them. I mean, teams aren't owned by a lot of families anymore, right? It's not individual ownership. It's sometimes it's corporate. So the money part of it's changing. So I don't know. I mean, I think until you get, and if they ever get, which seems unlikely, to the salary cap, which would also include a salary floor, if that ever happens, if it doesn't, I don't know how you can like limit this or something. If you say a team can't defer money, I don't know if MLB has the right to say that. They get to pay them however they want to pay. If the players agree to it, they agree to it. You'd think that bill would come due at some point, right? I mean, you keep kicking that down the road. At some point, they're going to have to pay. The bigger question is, like I said, and there is a new labor contract coming up after the 26th season. There's already a lot of people thinking there'll be a long lockout. And, I've even seen a couple articles saying that maybe this is the year that the owners try to go to the mat and try to get the salary cap and the salary floor tied in there somehow. And if it costs them a season, it costs them a season. And, obviously as people who are baseball fans, people whose jobs have to do with covering baseball, you don't want to see a season lost to labor issues. But, the sport probably is headed towards some type of moment of clarity here. Like which way is it going to go on that? Because the disparity is getting bigger and bigger between the highest payroll. I think, what did we see the other day? The Dodgers are up over 380 now. And I think the
Wild.
Rays and Marlins together are like 125 maybe right now. I mean, and then the A's have actually spent a little bit more, so they're up there a little bit. But to have some teams at 60 and some teams at 380 seems a little bit off.
Yeah, it's just I think when you look at the entire process, that you said clarity. I look for a day of reckoning, unfortunately, right? Because it's one thing when you have a team that spends like the Yankees did in 2009, and they go, "I'm going to get Sabathia, Teixeira, and Burnett," right? And then the next couple of years after they won the World Series, they kind of like trailed off and they didn't spend, and there was other teams. And when you're going back to back postseasons of Shohei Ohtani winning the World Series and then continuing to roll that ball down the hill, what's going to stop them? And I think we're getting closer to some of these teams, and I worry about more. I worry maybe a little bit less of the competitive balance, Mark. I'm worried more about the fans. I grew up watching this game and loving this game. It's in my blood. My dad was a coach. My grandfather was a coach. I know how much you love this sport, and I worry because they're doing so much to get more people invested. They're trying to speed these games up. But at the end of the day, if more and more teams are kind of like with the Rays, where you're struggling on really resonating with the players because you don't know if they're going to be there in 2 years. I mean, people aren't going to tune in. People aren't going to tune in on a Wednesday night to watch the Pirates and the Reds, right? Because they know in 2 years, Paul Skeens and Ellie De La Cruz, they're probably going to play for another team. So do you see kind of where I'm coming at with that, with as far as like the interest to the regular season product is going to take a hit with this as well? Do you agree with that?
I mean, I see your point. I don't know if I totally agree. I mean, I think there's an onus on those teams to find a way to build their fan base. If it's not built around, that one star player who you're going to keep, then you have to build it around, as we see sometimes do. You build it around the future, you build it around a group of new kids. You maybe come up with some catchy marketing campaign. You appeal more to your fans through price, and find
Mm-hmm.
ways to get them to the ballpark. We've seen teams do other entertainment, concerts. I mean, there's different ways to overcome that. I understand what you're saying, but I think there's also, like, as much as having that super team drives this, kind of separates these things. I also think you can see where there'll be fans tuning in who want to just see the Dodgers lose, who want to see the Dodgers get their
Right.
butts kicked. They become enemy number one. Like I said, the evil empire, like the Yankees used to be the most hated team. And, look, the Dodgers play down here. I think that's going to be a fascinating series, to see Shohei Ohtani and that group of all-stars playing, at a spring training stadium, playing at Steinbrenner Field. The intimacy of that stadium, as close as you're going to get, it's going to be a really interesting, like, dynamic. That's the superstar team, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
Lakers of the glory days, and the old Dallas Cowboys. That's the team where every player is pretty much a star, and they're kind of going to become like a traveling roadshow now, and they'll be loved by their fans, but I think they'll be booed by a lot of people too. So that maybe that offsets some of what you're saying, but yeah, a Tuesday night Reds Pirates game or a Rays Marlins game, whatever you want to pick, where there's not a lot of star players. It does need some ways to draw appeal, and you are going to have that. But I don't think until you get to salary cap, salary floor, that you can legislate that any other way.
I know this race season coming upon us is going to be probably one of the more unique seasons in your career. I mean, it's that's the understatement.
Hey, way to go
Of,
out and live there, buddy.
it's crazy, man. Like
Hey,
I'm
you know
just
what? I think Liam Cohn's going to come back. You know what? I'm going to go out and live.
I mean, and listen, if we're talking the stadium, that's just like another conversation. And your colleague at Tampa Bay Times, Colleen Wright, has done such a great job with that. And it seems like no new news for there. So I'm not going to ask you about that because we know that everything kind of has to be decided by March 31st when it comes to the future of Tropicana Field itself to see where this team is going to be playing beyond 2025 until that new stadium is built. There's so many more questions than answers. I heard the news, obviously, about Taylor Walls. They settle he's going to be back with the team, but any other moves you think that it's the Buccaneers? I got football in the mind. The Rays are going to make, especially with the bats, right? Because there's still got to be uncertainty, right? Does that affect like the uncertainty of their future, where they're going to play? Is that directly going to affect how they're going to assess this roster, especially with inquiring about bats to help this pretty strong pitching and starting rotation?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I mean, obviously, if they want to make a trade, the guy they're trading for doesn't have any control over that he's coming
Mhm.
here, right? I mean, if they were in the market where they were trying to sign some free agents to long-term deals, I do think that's an issue. That is a legitimate issue. A guy who has a chance to sign a 3 or 4 year contract, and or 5 or 6 year contract with Santander, just get five, I think 5 years,
Mhm.
with a 6 year option maybe with Toronto, and Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, there are some legitimate guys out there, but yeah, that's probably a tough sell if you're the Rays and you sit there and you say, not only are we not going to be able to give you the most amount of money, we're not going to win the bidding. We also, don't know. We think we're going to try and be back in the Trop in 26 and 27 and maybe 20, probably 28, but we're not sure if we'll be there in all of 26 or not, when it's going to be done. And we don't really know yet what's going to happen with beyond that, if we're going to get this new stadium or not in St. Pete. Yeah, that's a lot of uncertainty to ask a premium player. So that's, I think, a factor. And I know this story generated a lot of interesting comments, but I will stand by what I wrote a couple weeks ago or last week, that the Rays would have been uh, in the Sasaki bidding. I'm not saying they would have gotten him, but they, I think, would have gotten certainly past the first round, maybe even toward the finalist round. But that was a legitimate issue. Like, to not, there's a guy, you're getting him for 6 years, to not be able to tell him where you're going to play, and a guy that kind of came with this reputation of wanting things kind of on the low key, not
Mhm.
a lot of hassles, like not knowing where you're going to be and maybe having to move around for a couple of years. I think that would be a legitimate thing. So I think that was a factor with that. But otherwise, unless they're going for a big time multi-year free agents, I don't think that's a big deal. I mean, Danny Jansen knew what he was signing on for.
Right.
Yeah, I've talked to him. I heard him do a foul territory interview the other day. I mean, he knew exactly what he was getting into. So I don't think it's a big issue. in terms of the kind of players that they're going for. I do think it's something that's going to be a conversation. We're going to bring it up, obviously, as media, where it's going to be a lot of subject conversation. And it's going to come up as they go around the country, as visiting teams come in. Obviously, the 2 visits the Yankees make, where they're the visiting team at Steinbrenner Field, is going to be a big deal. And so it's going to be a topic of conversation. Do I think it's going to distract the current group of players in there? I don't know. I mean, there'll be some bitching and moaning, especially if there's some rainouts early or rain delays. But I think Kevin Cash and Eric Neander have already kind of planted the seed to get out ahead of that and try to use this as a galvanizing thing to help the team in that regard. So I don't think it's going to be a big issue from that standpoint. Now whether there's a lot of rain delays and games that don't get finished have to be made up, that could be a big issue from a competitive standpoint. But I don't think, like, conversationally, it's going to be a big issue. As far as improving the team, I mean, yeah, they haven't done a lot. Absolutely agree. They are banking on a lot of things happening and going the right way to get better based on guys who weren't good last year or will get more opportunity this year.
Marc Topkin doing a great job, as always, from the Tampa Bay Times. Got the article up there about the raised ticket price and Taylor Walls. And I've been telling everybody that would listen, make sure you guys subscribe, do whatever you can to support local media and especially the Tampa Bay Times. Marc, you do such a great job. I'm so appreciative of your time. And guess what? Liam Cohen, just because you put it out there in the atmosphere, he is returning as the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's not a one-trick pony, baby. He does football too. Marc, I appreciate it, man. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
All right, Jay, anytime.
All right.